The mystery of the missing Air Asia flight is solved as Indonesian officials spot the wreckage and recover bodies. The Ebola outbreak of 2014. What has been the economic impact of the outbreak? And a happy doggy becomes one of the last breakout YouTube stars of 2014. Africa 54 starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Indonesian officials have recovered at least 40 bodies from the sea near the wreckage of an Air Asia passenger jet that crashed during a storm Sunday. Local television Tuesday showed rescue helicopters pulling bodies from the Java Sea about 160 kilometers off the coast of Borneo Island, where the massive multi-nation search is being conducted. The bodies were located shortly after the discovery of wreckage, including what appeared to be an orange life jacket, luggage, and a red and white emergency door. Families of those on board the plane burst into tears after seeing the first images of the bodies, which were not wearing life jackets. By nightfall, rescuers had recovered only a quarter of those on board the jet. Indonesia's search and rescue chief felt confident that the debris field was that of the doomed plane.
From our findings as the Chief of Search and Rescue Coordinator, I declare there's a 95% chance, judging from the location where we've been searching and the location of the debris and stuff, we assume that it came from the plane.
Indonesian officials have also spotted a shadow under the surface of the water that is believed to be the main body of the plane. The search effort is also being bolstered by the arrival of a U.S. Navy warship, the USS Sampson, which is equipped with sonar that can scan underwater. The passengers included 149 Indonesians, 3 South Koreans, and 1 each from Britain, Malaysia, and Singapore. The crew included 6 Indonesians and a French co-pilot. In West Africa, heavy gunfire erupted around the presidential palace in Gambia's capital, Banjul, overnight, triggering soldiers to block the bridge leading to the city center. Armed attackers began shooting early Tuesday in Banjul, but the situation appeared calm by Monday. President Yahya Jammeh was not in the country, and there were conflicting reports about his exact location. There has been no confirmation of a coup attempt and no immediate statement by the government. Soldiers are restricting movements in and out of Banjul. Banks and offices in surrounding neighborhoods are closed and residents have locked themselves indoors. President Jammeh, 49, seized power in a coup in 1994 and has long faced criticisms for his human rights record. While the Somali government is confirming that Monday's U.S. airstrike near Shakor killed al-Shabaab's intelligence chief Abdishakur Talil. In a press statement issued by the National Intelligence and Security Agency, the government says Talil was killed along with 2 others while traveling in a car between Shakor and Jawari village. Residents say the car was completely destroyed. While terrorists' beheadings, the Ebola epidemic and illegal immigration were headline issues in the United States this year, prompting commentators to wonder whether Americans have been overcome by fear. VOA's Jerome Sokolovsky takes a look back.
Evil forces around the world want to harm Americans every day.
Negative campaign ads in this election year played up the advances of Islamic militants in the Middle East, as well as the Ebola epidemic. But retired Episcopal bishop and columnist Gene Robinson says the bigger threat to America was from the fear-mongering itself.
Their entry into our country through Arizona's backyard.
It's especially disturbing that a nation like the United States, which is unprecedented in its power, unprecedented in its resources, can live in such a fearful state.
Smile? This ad against texting while driving is an example of how fear can be harnessed to improve public health.
Just might have saved her life.
But at a recent conference of medical and other anthropologists in Washington, Doug Henry of the University of North Texas said the quarantines imposed on aid workers returning from Africa failed to do that.
What we've seen, unfortunately, in this epidemic is that if you have just fear and just fear messaging in the absence of any kind of self-efficacy messaging, in other words, messaging that shows people how to handle a response, it can actually have very maladaptive social behaviors, so driving the epidemic underground, mass panic, hysteria.
Fear has played a role before in American politics. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt gave his inaugural address there in front of the Capitol, and he declared,
"The only thing we have to fear is fear itself."
This thing? Holy
Popular comedian Jon Stewart maintained that in 2014, the news media magnified the danger.
Of attacks in the U.S.
If you've been paying attention to the news lately, you might have heard we're all going to die.
You know, there's always a level of uncertainty and fear in any culture.
Gregory Button of the University of Tennessee, Knoxville points out there's no mass hysteria over car accidents, one of this nation's leading causes of death.
Cultures selectively choose which social problems they're going to focus on, and sometimes it seems irrational.
While radical Islamists threatened to...
While political ads and media played up foreign threats, surveys showed Americans were much more concerned about job security and the economy. Jerome Sokolovsky, VOA News, Washington.
Well, if there is one thing American politicians agree on, is that the immigration system is broken and needs a comprehensive reform to fix it. But some observers say President Barack Obama's recent executive action aimed at temporarily shielding some undocumented foreigners from being deported may have doomed his long-term goal of forging a comprehensive agreement with Congress. VOA's Greg Flakers has more.
President Obama's recent executive action allows some 4 million undocumented residents in the United States to seek temporary legal status. But without congressional approval, he cannot achieve comprehensive immigration reform. Republicans, who won majorities in both houses of Congress in November's midterm elections, replied through Speaker of the House John Boehner.
Instead of working together to fix our broken immigration system, the president says he's acting on his own. That's just not how our democracy works.
Tony Payan, director of the Mexico Center at Rice University's Baker Institute, says Mr. Obama's action will help a lot of people come out of the shadows.
And essentially become a little bit more integrated in a legal, formal way into the American economy and the American society. But it was also very counterproductive because I feel that it polarized many of the Republicans who might have been willing to do something on immigration.
While some undocumented immigrants support the move, others have mixed feelings about what they see as a temporary fix.
We need a solution that really helps, and he should keep his promise. But it should be with Congress and everyone together.
Tony Payan says there are concerns about applying for legal status under this temporary measure.
Once they surrender their personal information to the government, once the government knows who they are and where they are, and if the next president is not willing to extend that temporary protected status, that they're going to be vulnerable to be found very quickly and to be denied.
Republicans say they want to secure the border with Mexico before approving other measures. The surge of Central American immigrants at the Texas border earlier this year underscored this concern. Republicans also oppose Democratic proposals for a so-called pathway to citizenship, which they see as a ploy to increase the Democratic voter base. But Houston immigration attorney Charles Foster says most immigrants seek legal resident status, not full naturalization.
If you look at the last big legalization bill signed by President Reagan, in almost 40 years, barely 30% have actually gotten around to applying for citizenship.
Foster says the immigration issue has divided the Republican Party.
While the business community is very supportive of immigration reform, there is a very vocal wing of the Republican Party that's adamantly against everything.
Analysts say it may still be possible for the Republican-controlled Congress and President Obama to achieve agreement on at least some parts of immigration reform next year, but that full reform is more likely to be delayed until after the 2016 presidential election. Greg Flakus, VOA News, Houston.
Well, the United Nations estimates that 40% of the world's population will live in Africa by 2050. Consequently, there will be a huge increase in the number of new parents who will be part of the growing workforce as economies expand. Hilary Hula in Nairobi takes a look at the challenges of parenting among the African working class.
Women around the world struggle with balancing work and family life. It's always a challenge to figure out how much time to take off to have babies and how much employers are willing to give. Esther Njau had her daughter, Marie, 5 months ago. Her company in Kenya offered 2 months of maternity leave, which she thought was too little. She felt she had no choice but to quit. Still, she's relatively lucky. Some of her friends, she says, have actually been fired or replaced when they got pregnant. This poses a serious dilemma to working women who want children.
Should I not? You're so confused. You're earning well, you're living well, but the moment you get pregnant, you're fired or you're replaced. So that's something that can keep you from getting more kids.
Like a number of African countries, Kenya does have an impressive raft of labor legislation. Ernest Nadome, who works for the Central Organization of Trade Unions, explains how it's supposed to work.
The Bill of Rights is quite clear and is quite generous. We've got very good laws that address issues of maternity. The lady employee is entitled to 3 months maternity leave, and on top of that, the lady employee also will not forfeit the normal annual leave that other male employees enjoy.
But many Kenyans work in the informal sector and have no contracts at all. Because of this, enforcing labor laws is difficult. Even in the more formal companies, many employers are unwilling to comply with the law due to economics.
If somebody is going for maternity leave, you replace him with somebody. So it's not practical for me to pay her because she's not productive anymore.
The absence of maternity leave can have far-reaching social consequences, says Ernest Nadome.
It's increased poverty amongst women. Poverty amongst women is high. Because I will imagine that if the employers were adhering to the labor laws and making sure they extend the benefits, the necessary benefits to these ladies, it will go a long way in uplifting their living standards.
As African economies grow, attitudes towards parental leave have been changing. A number of countries now offer more maternity leave than before, and many offer paternity leave as well. Njau says she thinks Kenyan women are better off now than they were a generation ago. And with more and more discussion around the issue, there are hopes Africa's labor laws will eventually benefit everyone. Hilary Hula for VOA News, Nairobi.
Well, until October 2014, the U.S. Central Bank helped to stabilize the American economy through a massive bond buying plan. Through this monetary stimulus plan, billions of dollars were also injected into emerging economies. Some of that money is now coming back. As 2014 comes to a close, Mila Sege takes a look at what that means for the global economy.
Since 2008, the U.S. Central Bank has pumped nearly $4 trillion into the global economy. Besides boosting liquidity, quantitative easing has also lowered U.S. interest rates to record lows. But instead of causing a spike in inflation as many had feared, some of the money began flowing into countries where yields were higher. Catherine Mann is chief economist at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
Emerging markets have been the beneficiaries of investors' search for yield.
Among the beneficiaries, the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. But now, with U.S. interest rates set to rise next year, Brad McMillan at Commonwealth Financial Network says some of that money will start flowing back to the United States. He spoke to us on Skype.
Because with U.S. rates starting to rise, the attractiveness of the U.S. as an investment destination continues to increase. You're going to see a lot of capital that went to the emerging markets potentially come back.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, says the OECD's Catherine Mann.
Part of the reason why that's the case is that tapering has happened along with a speed up in the U.S. economy. So the emerging markets, even as capital was being reallocated, ended up doing better from the standpoint of exporting.
That's because a stronger dollar makes foreign exports cheaper. On the other hand, it's also likely to produce increased volatility, the ups and downs in financial markets. Mohammed El-Arian is Chief Economic Advisor at financial services firm Alliance.
Why has volatility returned to the foreign exchange market? Because we're going from a world of multi-speed central banking to multi-track central banking. In the old days, everybody was doing the same thing, just different magnitudes. Now, we have two central banks that are lifting their foot off the accelerator, the Bank of England and the Fed, and we have two other central banks that are putting their foot more on the accelerator, the ECB and the Bank of Japan.
Experts say price volatility is an integral part of economic normalization. International finance consultant James Berkeley says it may prove a turning point for the global economy. He spoke with us on Skype.
Governments really should be focused on trying to maximize international trade and to really take advantage of this period of beyond recovery. We're now into a period I would describe of serious sustained growth.
Despite the economic slowdown in parts of the world, experts say a stronger U.S. economy, along with lower oil prices, is likely to boost consumption. And when consumers buy more, emerging markets, which produce more than 35% of the world's goods, are likely to be among the winners in 2015. Millar Sega, VOA News, Washington.
Want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered? Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54 and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, the economic impact of the Ebola outbreak. Stay with us.
Happy New Year from VOA.
VOA. Happy New Year from VOA.
VOA की जानिब से नया साल मुबारक.
American citizen mutlu.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year from VOA.
Happy New Year. From all of us here at VOA.
Welcome back. Now, the number of people infected by Ebola in the three countries worst affected by the outbreak has passed 20,000, with slightly more than 7,800 deaths so far. Sierra Leone has been the worst hit country in the worst outbreak of the disease on record. The epidemic has had a big impact on the economy in West Africa, and its effects are expected to continue being felt in 2015. It's the disease that has devastated lives in three of Africa's poorest countries. Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone account for all but 15 deaths in the world's worst Ebola outbreak. It's claimed more than 6,300 victims. And then there is the financial toll. The World Bank says the cost to sub-Saharan Africa's economy could reach $3 to $4 billion in 2015. Daniel Richards is Senior Africa Analyst at Business Monitor.
The worst affected sector, we believe, is the mining sector. This was a sector that was expected to really power growth in these three countries over the coming years. Massive ramp-up in investment in iron ore exports. The combination of the Ebola crisis and the global drop in iron ore prices has meant that the sector has really been hit. Mines have closed in Sierra Leone. 2 major mines have closed there. There's restrictions on movement, markets being closed, borders being closed.
The World Bank has pledged $200 million to fight the crisis. It's also working with the IMF and the Africa Development Bank on tranches of budget support for the countries.
For years to come, the effects of the Ebola crisis will be felt. It's not only in the immediate years where a lack of investment, we felt a lack of building going on into infrastructure, but also the fact that a generation will have not gone to school for a year, and there is some evidence that when that happens, children don't then go back to school, they might leave completely.
The bank forecast Sierra Leone and Guinea's economies will both shrink by 2% and 0.2% respectively in 2015.
In Liberia, where there are signs of containing the epidemic, its growth estimate is 3%. But the pain is also being felt elsewhere.
People don't want to travel to West Africa for business meetings, for conferences. So while it's not a major catastrophe as it might have been if it had spread to Nigeria or spread in Nigeria and from there elsewhere in the continent, it has really hurt the region.
Despite foreign aid and deployment of U.S. and British troops, the international response to the epidemic has been branded sluggish and patchy. What happens next partly lies in the hands of the pharmaceutical companies rushing to develop Ebola vaccines. The U.S. has offered liability protection to drug makers and has urged other countries to follow suit. Medical researchers reported interesting new advances and even breakthroughs in 2014 in the use of modern technology to help patients suffering from different diseases and injuries. VOA's George Putic revisits some of the most important developments.
Magnetic resonance imaging machines, the so-called MRI scanners, have been a valuable tool since the 1980s, but could only show static pictures. This year, researchers at the University of California, Davis, reported they have developed a way to capture moving images of body parts. Orthopedic surgeon Robert Sabo is already using the scanner called active MRI.
We can understand why one person develops an unstable wrist, why one person has pain and wears out the joint surface on one area of the wrist, and what we can do to replace, make better products, or even do soft tissue corrections to improve that patient's life.
Severe spinal cord injuries usually lead to total loss of control of lower extremities, as well as bladder, bowel, and sexual functions. Scientists at the University of Louisville, Kentucky, used implanted electrical devices to help patients regain at least some of those functions. Dr. Roderick Pettigrew of the National Institutes of Health says a spinal cord injury may no longer mean lifelong paralysis.
What we see today with these 4 individuals now being able to have voluntary motion and voluntary control of their limbs and involuntary control of functions like bladder and bowel is very exciting. It is a milestone.
Researchers at Chalmers University of Technology in Göteborg, Sweden, also continued to develop brain implants for prosthetic devices that behave and feel sensation just like real arms and hands. And Medtronic Corporation in the U.S. used electrical brain stimulation to relieve symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Patient David Dewsnap says before the implants, he couldn't take even a short walk.
It's giving my life back. This procedure's been just amazing for me. Without seeing me before, you don't really understand what it was like. I couldn't use the left side of my body was completely, I couldn't use it really.
This year, scientists also came closer to fulfilling the promise that stem cells may someday help regenerate damaged tissue. Scientists at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine reported that some of their severely injured patients grew new muscle tissue with the help of stem cells growing on a matrix made of pig's bladder. 3D printers also proved this year to be useful in medicine. Chinese doctors printed a replacement vertebra for a severely injured teenager. Beijing University orthopedics head Dr. Liu Zhongjun, who led the surgical team, says 3D printing is a huge advantage for artificial implants.
可以利用病人的影像学检查，比如说 CT， 把它的数据转换成 3D 打印的数据，生产出和病人骨骼结构完全形态一样的这么一个内植物。
With all the promising developments in medical technology this year, 2015 may bring even more breakthroughs in this important field. George Putic, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. An excited puppy is YouTube's newest star. We'll be right back. Look at that.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines.
In Ivory Coast, the trial of former First Lady Simone Gbagbo resumes for her alleged role in post-election violence in 2010. Motorcycles replace bicycles as the backbone of transport in northern Ghana. And African countries found ways to safeguard their natural resources in 2014 and bring about developmental change. And this year has also shown that there is always something new in African art. Finally, in Cameroon, Douala Hip Hop Festival showcases Central African talent.
That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here is what's trending. An excited puppy becomes the latest internet viral star. An excited puppy began to jump at its cage and almost danced when its owner showed up to pick up the dog from puppy daycare. The choco poodle leaps up and down on its hind legs and sways side to side when the owner gets within view of the pup in the video. What a fantastic greeting. Now, the video excited puppy spots its owner has racked up over 5 million views since it was posted a week ago. Well, next up, from the streets of New York to Hong Kong, 3D art was hot in 2014. In New York, artist Trina Mary is turning heads by making people disappear into the background. Mary creates images that seamlessly camouflage her mostly nude models into fabulous landmarks, including the Manhattan Bridge and the Empire State Building. Her art form is the result of a meticulous process that relies on models to strike a pose and hold it for hours. 3D trick art has long been popular on the streets of Asia, but now it's going to new heights. This mind-boggling art form is now blossoming on canvases in Hong Kong. Well, and finally, as 2014 draws to a close, we continue to salute the trends and videos that took on a life of their own. So it's only natural that we give a special shout-out to Japan. After all, Japan is ground zero of some of the most cutting-edge trends in the world, including the black cheeseburger. This fall, Burger King Japan introduced the Kuro burger, and social media went wild. The burger has spread and cheese blackened by bamboo charcoal and a special sauce made from squid ink. Now, if a black cheeseburger isn't your thing, how about a cute mascot? Mascots are a huge business in Japan, and at this year's International Mascot Summit, a leaping pair stole the show. The pair has hundreds of thousands of fans on social media and Twitter, and that is what is trending today. Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC in the mornings. Today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Happy New Year from VOA.
សួស្តីឆ្នាំថ្មីពី VOA.
Happy New Year from VOA.
VOA की जानिब से नया साल मुबारक.
American Citizen Mutliullah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year from VOA.
Happy New Year. From all of us here at VOA.
We're able to touch on things that are important to people on an everyday basis. Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54.
In a lively half hour, news, sports, health, lifestyle information, comments from our viewers. Africa 54, the best for Africa, about Africa. Join us only on VOA.